Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. I'm really excited for today's video. Obviously, a lot of progress is happening on the renovation. You can tell from the mess behind me, but today we're going to focus on the plywood wall DIY that I shared on my Instagram and my TikTok, and I'm obsessed with it. First of all, a lot of progress has been made with the beams. Obviously, they still look a little bit dirty because they're not done, but look at how much of a difference it makes. It really just makes it a completely different design style. We have some updates on the windows as well. Those have been worked on, and just some other little random bits here and there have been sanded. But yeah, so I have been itching to do an actual aesthetic project, so we started doing this plywood wall idea that I had for the filming room. I think it'll be a really amazing backdrop and also just like a nice little architectural moment in there. So we're gonna do it. Let's get into it. This room is going to be my filming room, and I think it will be so nice to have a setup with cameras and everything already there to make the YouTube process a lot faster. I'm going to keep this closet to store Cricut supplies, other DIY supplies, and extra camera equipment, but I want this wall right here to be really aesthetic, to act as a backdrop or even just a place to take pictures when I have people over. In the future, I want to add a Murphy bed as well, but the first tasks for now are definitely new doors and a subfloor. But for now, let's focus on this plywood wall. So let's talk about the supplies that you will need. The first step is to go to the hardware store and pick out a bunch of pieces of plywood. I love getting pieces that have varying grain patterns for interest. If you want it to be a full accent wall like I do, then you'll need a big sheet of plywood or two to cover the back. And if there's an outlet, then you'll want some outlet spacers and a tool to cut a hole out of the plywood with. You're going to need a jigsaw to cut the wood, but always remember that you can rent tools if needed. You'll also want some sandpaper, you'll want some paint for the edges of the shapes to add depth, you'll want some wood glue to keep the pieces together, and some sealant to seal everything off. I recommend a spray if it's a bigger project, and maybe some nails or screws depending on your install method. Let's get into it. So obviously we made a tester piece to see how we liked it, and it came out so great. I just used a sawtooth hanger to put it on the wall, so that's an amazing option if you don't want a full accent wall. But we did want a full accent wall, so we have to start by getting the space cleared out first. To make the whole accent wall, we started by cutting the back piece to size, or pieces in our case because the wall was too big, and we cut out the outlet hole. I made a mock-up of the design on my computer, so I knew the measurements of the pieces I wanted and would just draw out the shapes on the plywood pieces. If you don't have a way to mock up shapes on your computer, you could always just sketch them out on paper and use general measurements. You can use some tape on the wood to make the jigsaw cuts clean, but since I have so many pieces to cut and I could not be bothered with all of that work, a good alternative is to just turn it upside down and draw your shapes backwards, so that way the front edge is clean. When using a jigsaw to cut out the shapes, make sure that you push down on it and keep it against the wood for best results. Once the pieces are cut, you can start laying them out on the ground to see how they're fitting together in case you have to adjust anything. Then, once you get them to a place that you like, you can start to sand them down so there's no rough edges. And once they're all sanded, it's time to paint the edges. You could use any color at all for this. You could get really creative, but since mine is in a nook, you will not be able to see the color unless you're right up against the wall. So because of this, I just opted for some black to add some depth to it because I already had some leftover black paint on hand from the garage. And then you just want to glue all of the fun shapes together with some wood glue, and it's important to use a good amount of it and give it plenty of time to dry for stability. Then you just want to seal it all off so that it's nice and waterproof and cleanable, and I used a brush on poly for my first piece because it was a smaller piece, but since this wall is so large, we switched over to a spray version for speed. You want to use a fine sandpaper and give it some sands in between each coat to make sure that it's extra smooth, and the more coats that you use, the more glossy and commercialized it will feel in the end. That is something that I personally love, so I made sure that I used a lot of coats. And then it's time to install it, and we are putting the back panels on before any of the 3D pieces to make it easier than attaching those afterwards. We're just using some screws to do this to make sure that it's nice and sturdy on the studs. You'll also want to make sure that your outlet is extended and ready to go, and you want the outlet plate to be on the front of the wood for a clean finish. Okay, so this is what it is looking like. I love the pattern so much. We got an outlet cover that matches the wall, so that blends in a lot better, and that's really nice. This is a really good example of the difference in textures if you don't put enough layers of poly on something, because this little piece right here has a lot of layers of poly and the other ones do not. So something that I'm gonna do while it's on the wall is just give everything more coats of brush on poly so it really looks really seamless. And obviously we will eventually have the new flooring and we will paint the walls around this and probably seal the cracks and everything. But for right now, this is where we're at. We've been awake for like 48 hours straight together working on this. So I'm gonna call this done enough for the video. That is it for today's video. I hope that you guys liked it. Let me know in the comments if you're going to try this, and if you do, please tag me in your photos. I want to see them so bad. This is one of my favorite DIYs that I've done. I think it's so pretty. Make sure to subscribe if you have not yet so you don't miss any new updates, and also give this video a like if you liked it because it will really help us out. And I'll see you guys on next week for some more design stuff. Bye guys.